December 2021, I was hospitalized, not knowing what was happening or what was going on. And the doctors even came to me and said, "Mr. Brown, what's wrong with you?" And I was in a confused state. A lot of things were happening. I felt there was an exorcism happening to me because I couldn't stay still on the bed. My body was going up, down, beating upon the bed. And it got to a point that I couldn't breathe anymore. It felt as if my lungs were caving in. I could feel the pain coming from inside my lungs. And it got to a point where I felt like the whole hospital was turning, but it wasn't. It was like my brain was squeezing and was turning. And I didn't know what to do. It got to a point where I was like, you know what? This is it. And I was like, into your hands I commit my spirit. Let's go back in time. So I had an aunt that used to stay with us when we were quite young. This was 2004, around 2004, 2005. I think I was in JS1 or JS2. And we didn't know that she actually had HIV. And at that point, it was actually full-blown AIDS. And I was quite very young, and I was really close to her. Like, we would share meals, we would share like fruits and all of that. And she was always like, her gums were bleeding and all those things. And we now heard that she died, and she died of HIV and AIDS. And I was in shock because when we were quite young, the news about HIV and AIDS is that there is no cure, there is nothing that can, if you just touch the person or whatever it is, you share food with the person or cutlery with the person, like you have HIV. And I literally froze. That's the word. I literally froze, and I couldn't get that thought out of my mind. And when we were young, our parents took all of us to the clinic. We all did the test, and it was negative. But that was the door that the devil used to, that was what he used to open that seed to the spirit of fear that came into my life. And things kept on happening. I started hearing voices in my head at a point. I started hearing, "You have HIV, you will die." That's what I was hearing in my head. And I was young, I didn't tell anyone. I was just going through it thinking, oh, it's just a thought, it's not real, all those kind of things. But I didn't do anything about it. I didn't use the word. I didn't even tell anyone. I just let it slide. And then it got to a point that anytime I would feel sick, I start feeling like I'm having symptoms of HIV. Like I would Google it and be like, what are the symptoms of HIV? And then it would almost look like it is it, but it wasn't. And it kept on going on. And then fast forward to when I grew up and I was in the university in Cyprus. It got to a point where glimpse of it started coming in. I still didn't know what it was. I would feel very uninspired. I could start stuff, but I won't complete it. I was procrastinating. I would get very tired. It was looking as if I would feel exhausted to the point. And it got to a point I couldn't do stuff anymore. Like things were getting out of hand. Like I couldn't even play the drum for long because I would feel exhausted. And then I started having mood swings. I started having a lot of blowouts in anger. Too many things were happening. And then got to 2021 December. I landed at the hospital. And then after that, I was told that there's nothing wrong with me. There's nothing wrong with my body. That it has to be something that is psychological. They started asking me questions. How is my work life? How is my relationship? Is it stressful? I was like, all of these things, it doesn't make sense. What do they mean by that? So imagine you moving from really active to being very dull. Like it started all the way from 2017. I started becoming very, like I get really tired real quick. And then it got to the point where I couldn't even do anything. And I started having hypnotic jerks where I couldn't even sleep. I started having sleep regression. And then after the clinic, they told me that, they are going to place me on a medication called fluoxetine. It's actually a mood stabilizer and it's an antipsychotic drug that was going to help me with balancing my mood and emotions and all of that. And then we went on to, then they now added another drug called Remeron under the mitrizipine chain, and that was going to help me with sleep at night, and it was going to help calm my nerves and my muscles. I was like, you know what, just give me the drugs. At that point, I wanted to feel better because just prior before the hospital, I couldn't do anything, I couldn't sleep, I couldn't stop the intrusive thoughts that were coming in. It's as if my mind was racing. It was a whole lot. It was as if my mind was going to explode. And you start feeling the breathlessness, like you start feeling pins and needles, you start feeling like your brain is being squashed, and you get to a point where you can't even remember things. And a lot of things were just overlapping, symptoms upon symptoms upon symptoms. It got to the point my blood pressure spiked up to over like 140, 150, over 100. And my heart rate was on a steady every day. My heart rate would be, even while sitting or lying down, my heart rate would be around 110, 120. If I stand up, it will get to like 150, 160, depending. And it was tiring because imagine your heart rate at that level, you just get exhausted. And then I was placed on these drugs. I started feeling better. Then I got engaged in 2022 February. I got engaged. I thought I was done with that. Then after the engagement, I went to Nigeria. And during the course of things in Nigeria, I felt I had gotten a hang of it. And now I was like, you know what? I started remembering my days of faith. I was like, I'm a man of faith. I'm going to stop this medication. So I just started taking it anyhow. No one warned me about what they call, no one literally warned me of what they call withdrawal symptoms. And withdrawal symptom is literally worse than you feeling the anxiety symptoms because it's almost like times 1,000. Everything becomes heightened. So that was the first time I had in Nigeria around June, around my wife's birthday. Then she was my fiance. I started feeling weird symptoms. I started having weird stuff that I will feel like things are working on my body. I started feeling like pins and needles. I started having heart palpitations and all of that. And then I started having like anxiety attacks. And at the same time, before you know, it blew up into panic attack. And then I was rushed to the hospital again. This was the second time now I'm being rushed to the hospital. This was in Nigeria. So yes, another panic attack happened. I was rushed to the hospital. I came back, and then I was not on medication again. They had to stop me on medication on cold turkey. So that means it was abrupt. They just stopped it. They didn't taper down. They didn't do anything about that. They just stopped everything. And then it now got to a point where I was like, you know what, since I'm off these medications, I was told that I'll be off the medications for now, and then they will give me a new set of like drugs. I can't even remember the ones they gave me in Nigeria at first. This was in Abuja. And then it wasn't working. I was still feeling the way I was feeling. I was feeling exhausted. I was throwing up. I always throw up. I don't know why. Anytime I wake up in the morning, I would throw up. Things were happening, and I didn't know what to do. So from June into July ending, literally for a month, I did not sleep at night. And if I ever slept, it was not more than 1 hour or 2 hours. So for a month, I was clocking just 1 hour or 2 hours of sleep. And it was very excruciating. The pain was much because every day I'm waking up, my heartbeat is always up there. And so at a point in time, there was a decision for me to like go back to Calabar. So I went to Calabar. My wife went to Rivers State where her people were. So I went home. My parents were shocked. They didn't know what was happening. And they prayed. There was prayers that were happening. It was as if the more we prayed, the more the symptoms, and the more it looked as if things were spiraling out of control. And then I was taken to a psychiatric hospital in Calabar, and I met a psychiatric doctor, a psychiatrist, and she told me, okay, from what is happening, at first they had a confusion because they were like, they don't know whether it's bipolar, they don't know whether it's this, they don't know whether it's that. But she said from the symptoms and the signs, it's actually general anxiety disorder. And then I was placed on 2 medications, fluoxetine and olanzapine, 10 milligrams every night, and then I would take fluoxetine in the morning. And then for the first time in 1 month, I was able to sleep because of the olanzapine. It was actually a very strong medication. So I was on that for like 6 months, and then after a period of time, I got married, and then we were expecting our first child. And then by December 2022, I noticed that for 6 months I've been taking these drugs. I was like, let me go for a checkup and all. Since we're now in Port Harcourt, I went back to Calabar and I went to the clinic where I was given the prescription, and then the doctor that was there was no longer there. She was on like maternity leave, and then there was a new doctor that met me, and then she shouted. She was like, my God, how can you be on olanzapine for 6 months and you have not been tapered down or changed into something else? And I was shocked. I was like, what do you mean? She was like, the way it stands, you need to run 2 tests. And I was like, I need to do lipid profile, I need to do blood sugar test. So I came back to Port Harcourt, and I did the test. As at then, there was really nothing much. But that was the first time I noticed that after 6 months, that was the first time I became 100 kg. I added weight, and I was not myself. I couldn't get inspired. The drugs were even making things even worse. I could just leave, but I couldn't do any other thing. So after that, I was told to stop the olanzapine. So this was the 3rd time I'm being asked to stop, and without tapering down. So I stopped, and then it started affecting me again. I started having withdrawal symptoms again. Got to the point I literally would sweat like just half of my face, and a lot of things were happening. And I started doing research. I was like, you know what? Let me research. I started researching on people that were taking olanzapine, and then they had to like stop. It was terrible, the things I saw. So I told my wife, I said, look at these things. She was like, who's going to take? It's not funny, but trust me. But what she said was, it really brought me back to the sense that we in every situation you find yourself, God literally can bring you out of it. She was like, who is going to take care of you? Because I'm taking care of this child, I'm taking care of you at this point in time. Because literally she was doing everything for me. She would literally, the only thing I could do for myself was to go to the bathroom and bathe myself. But that was it. Every other thing, she was doing it for me. And then she was like, this is terrible. Like, we're just getting married, we have our first child, and you're almost in a vegetable state. I couldn't do anything. I couldn't walk. I couldn't look at screens. I couldn't even look at people face to face. I was not even this kind of person. So everything was just looking like, when would this end? because it was, you feel better today, you take drugs today, so I was like, you know what? Let's agree on this, and I will stop taking this medication. And we agreed on it, and I did stop. And I remembered that this was the same God that helped me with a lot of things. I had a lot of CV when it came to like doing certain things with God pertaining to faith. And I was like, if this same God can do these same things, then this same God can bring me out of this situation. So I started again April 2023. Yeah, started again with the whole withdrawal symptoms. I said this time around, I'm not taking medications any longer. I started praying, and the Holy Spirit took me back in time and showed me that this was where that thing was introduced, because I never knew that what happened to me when I was actually quite young with my aunt was actually what brought in the spirit of fear into my life. And immediately he showed me that I started addressing it spiritually, and then I started watching he led me to certain videos on YouTube that I started watching, people that had come out of like general anxiety disorder, that were on drugs, and people that were not on drugs. So I started going, so I found one guy on YouTube, I started watching, I started doing certain things. There were some things he allowed me to do, some worked, some didn't work. There were some he was like, don't even do it. So I started doing these things. I'll talk with my wife. It was so terrible because I didn't even have, it was as if I didn't have emotions again. I couldn't feel. Like, imagine you looking at your wife. I couldn't feel, I couldn't do marital businesses. I couldn't do anything because my libido was really low. You can Google what that is. Just thinking about my wife. I was thinking about my son as at then. I couldn't feel, I couldn't laugh. Like, I was just like a robot because the drugs had messed up everything about me. And then I started trying things. That was when I started mindfulness. I would take a scripture or I would take certain words and I would start quoting them to myself. I started doing certain things. I saw like beating cold water in the morning. And before you know, by July 2023, I started feeling better. I started doing things. I started waking up in the morning to do exercise. I started being consistent. I started doing things. And I noticed that the more I started doing spiritual and physical things combined, I started seeing improvements. And I now started noticing that I could laugh, I could smile, I could feel emotions again. I could feel those butterflies you feel, I could feel those things. Some of the symptoms started reducing. Some didn't, then some actually started going away. Some still stayed. But the more I kept on doing it, the more I kept on doing most things, I noticed that I started having that hope again that there is actually an end to this. So I kept on doing it. I kept on praying even more. I kept on doing more research. I started trying to understand my body, myself. Fast forward to 2023 December. By then, I started writing exams, started doing things again. I started connecting back to my wife. Everything started getting better. 2024 was like a new year. Things were happening. I noticed that in February 2024, that was now when I started going like 1 month without symptoms. Like before then, I could wake up in a day and have over 20 to 30 symptoms from head to toe. It got to a point that after 1 year of not taking these medications, I noticed that I had improved. I could sleep very well, doing certain things. I had to learn rent. I started utilizing what I was told by one of the psychiatric doctors: rent, rest, exercise, nutrition, and trust. So I started doing most of these things. I started having sleep hygiene. The more I started doing all of these things, I noticed that I got better. And for the first time, after 1 year, I look back and I was so grateful to God that I could literally do most of these things without these medications and without feeling these symptoms. Then I started doing other things. I started applying for jobs in 2024 again. And it was as if I got my life back, and which I did. And lo and behold, April 2024, I got our second child came. And in the midst of all this stress, I noticed that I could handle them. So I noticed that most of some symptoms would want to come, but they were coming based on stress and no longer because of the things that I went through, right? So with all of these things, I can now say, this is me saying post general anxiety disorder, that it's possible that God indeed can bring me out of this situation. That it's possible that I can have my life back without depending on these medications to live. In a nutshell, here I am today, free of medications and free of all those symptoms and free of all those voices. And to let you know that if you are in this situation, if you are going through any of it, I'm here to tell you that you can come out of it the same way God brought me out of it.